right, so welcome everyone. My name is Kate Leatherbarrow, Lindsay Wilson. We have Nancy Demarest from Blandford Blenheim, councillor with us tonight to talk all things election. And everybody, has lots of questions for what do we need to know to run, or those hard questions of what was it like, and so on and so forth. So we're going to start with a land acknowledgement. Hold on one second here. So, while we are meeting virtually in Oxford County, we have municipal campaign school partners and students across Southwestern Ontario. As you begin your journey into politics, we invite you to consider how all levels of government and their elected leaders can tackle the 94 calls to action found in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improve our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. We acknowledge that there were peoples, cultures, and traditions on all these lands long before we were. We acknowledge the traditional territories of the Neutral, the Attawandarun, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Lenape-Wak, the Algonquin, the Lenape, and the Ojibwe, Chippewa peoples. Thank you. All right, so let's dive into it. Nancy, tell us about you. This is your first term as a councillor, is that correct?
Yeah, so 3.5 years into my first term.
Okay, perfect. And so the last municipal election was 2018, and we are approaching another municipal election this fall. So can you walk us through sort of the thought process? Did someone ask you directly to run? Was there an issue in your community?
Yeah, so I was interested in municipal politics. My father was a township councillor back in the early 80s. So I guess to a certain extent, it was in my blood.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a real privilege to have the trust of your community and to make decisions on their behalf. And I certainly don't take that lightly.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the process I went through, when I started to see information come out about the 2018 election, my first thought was that I would learn as much as possible. I'd start going to council meetings. And I'd run in 2022. And I had a mindset to do that. But as some of the deadlines came closer, and I was talking to some former councillors and former mayor, and just trying to understand what some of the issues they were dealing with locally, I kept hearing over and over again, you should run now. Mm-hmm. And I'd be like, oh no, I don't know enough. I can't possibly. But it happened a few times. And then I found out that the incumbent female had decided not to run. So there were 4 positions open for councillor. There were 9 men running for those positions and no women. Mm-hmm. And I thought, that's not good. Maybe I will run. So I decided to jump in. It was very last minute. I was the last person to put my name on the list. Was not prepared as far as signage, what my platform was. I really knew very little, but I did know that I wanted to represent. I did know that I wanted, to protect all those positive experiences that I had growing up rural. I certainly had the passion. So I would advocate for anyone who has the passion to do this.
That's great. I love that you had thought about doing it the next election, because Lindsay and I often talk about there is no better time than now. However, isn't it nice to live in a perfect world where you can plan things down the road and do it then? But the reality is that there's no better time than now. So I'm glad that you ran and that you won.
Yeah. And you're right. You can put things off it indefinitely, right? There's always a reason not to do it. And and it was just the opportunity to maybe even things out a little bit on council, that appealed to me. You know, I think another part of your question was about the process now for the 2022 election. And certainly I have more confidence now than I did back then. It was scary, and I knew nothing. All I had was passion. I had to scramble to get my thoughts in order. But in 2022, I feel like I have momentum, and there's just more that I want to accomplish. Now that I'm in it, and know a little more than I did back then, there's a real desire to do more and to do better. We live in a world of political partisanship right now, and I see a lot of divides. It's a scary time, and instead of being scared off by that, I think I prefer to soldier on.
That's great. I love that. I love that. And so, Nancy, can you walk us through, just for some of the viewers that aren't familiar with Oxford, you are in sort of like the rural area, or one of the rural areas in Oxford. So what would the population be in Drumbo, which is where you're located, correct?
Yeah, so there's about 7,600 in all of Blandford Blenheim. And I actually live on the farm that I grew up in. So I'm just outside of Drumbo, and I'm not sure what Drumbo's at now, 400 these days, 400 or 500 these days. So yeah, small rural community for sure. And still centers around farming for the most part. Yeah.
Nancy, I know something that Kate and I have talked about before is like all of our townships have these councils and their representation, and the rural communities make up, just as much, in terms of population as the urban centers. So how would you describe rural politics and, like being a councillor? How would you describe the job to other people?
Yeah, there's more activity than what you would expect. We certainly don't have the populations that you're dealing with in the urban areas, and we have much different issues. We have a lot of gravel roads, for example, so something that you wouldn't have exposure to. But a typical week or a typical day would really varies. Sometimes I'll go 3 or 4 days where I don't have any emails or calls to respond to, and then other times, it's a 12-hour day doing research, etc. On various issues, drainage issues, for example, that you might not run into in the urban centers. So there's a real broad variety of topics and issues that come up. Probably more recently, we've been looking at the agricultural policy in the county, and it's been very important for rural councillors to understand some of the prospective changes in county policy, and to be able to advocate for what is in our best interest. So yeah, few things.
And to your point, Nancy, we talk a lot about campaigning can sometimes be different than the role itself. Would you agree with that, in terms of, obviously you've explained that you've learned a lot and all of those kind of things, but would you see a bit of a difference from campaigning to being an elected official?
Yeah, I think campaigning in the rural areas is obviously very different. We in the smaller villages, we were able to do the traditional door knocking, but it's a little more difficult in the rural areas because some of the farms are so widespread. So I had a little bit different strategy for that. But as far as campaigning and being on council, differences in that, being on council, obviously it's a lot more formal, in your communications with people. When you're campaigning, it's much more laid back, and you can you don't have to, check your responses quite as much as when you're actually on council. So there's certainly a different feel of interaction. But on the other hand, I find in rural communities that we just are, we just all know each other. We know the histories. We're all real straight shooters. Not real, it's not the real politics, right? That you might find more in our urban centers. So, yeah.
But that's why we're so happy to have you, because it was really great when Lindsay and I partnered up on this. Lindsay lives in Ingersoll and I live in Woodstock, and it was a really great kind of, light bulb goes off idea to say, well, we should offer this to all of Oxford, because I'm hoping just some of the rural routes, whether it's in Oxford, Center, Wellington, etc., hopefully they can have some inspiration from women like you to say that, there's still seats that need to be filled in the rural areas, and that small but mighty, but still very important, right?
Yeah, and I think it's the 2018 election was in Blanford Blenheim was indicative that one female running and 8 or 9 men running, it's tough to get women to run in rural areas. Yeah. It really is. The type of people that tend to run, will often have, backgrounds in business or professionals, not necessarily, but sometimes. So convincing, a farmer, the female partner to run is a different conversation than it might be who a friend of yours that's a lawyer or an accountant, right? But the value that having someone directly from the farm community on your rural council, I can't emphasize enough how important that is, because they're really the only ones that know the issues of our population. So yeah, it's so important to get the female perspective on council.
What do you think are like some of the misconceptions about municipal politics that make people feel like, oh, that's not for me, you have to be a business person, which we all, the three of us, know that's not true, but the reality is that's a stereotype we're trying to break down. So how do you think we break that barrier?
Yeah, it really is a misconception. You don't have to have a university degree to run for council, or you don't. You really have to. It starts with passion and a desire to serve your community, and if you have that, that's the best basis to start upon. I think that probably one of the biggest misconceptions I find, though, of municipal politics is that you can't facilitate change at this level. I think there's a misconception that the higher tiers, the county and the province, are the decision makers, and we really don't have any influence. We're just rubber stampers. So if you're in it for passion and want to make things, you want to change things, keep walking, because this isn't for you. That's not the case at all. At this level, we really have the ear of our constituents. We're closer to any of the constituents than any other level of government. And we're at the grassroots. So in my mind, that gives us credibility. You can always advocate. There's tons of opportunity to advocate and affect decision-making. So don't ever feel that it's a rubber stamp position, because it's really not. It's a chance to support what you like in your community or change what doesn't work, for sure. Have a voice.
I love that. I think that's on its own so inspirational, because I think too, sometimes depending on, again, the basis of just, I really love my community and I love giving back and I love volunteering, or I enjoy being involved. It's nice to hear that then you're kind of aligning your values with that position, because exactly, sometimes you're told, well, it's way, way, way at the top that you'll see that change. So that's really reassuring, and I'm glad that you've shared that. So, I'm just looking over. Lindsay, did you have the next?
Yeah, I think, talking about the possibility to have change in your community is a good way to lead into the next question, which is, what's something that you've accomplished during your time as a councillor that you look back on or you look forward to, that you're really proud that you were able to accomplish that as a councillor?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think by virtue of being involved in council, I've had really two fantastic opportunities to be involved. I'm the co-chair of Habitat for Humanity built here in Drumbo. And that came about because Blandford Blenheim the township had some excess land. And so my role in that was really, I'm certainly not the brainchild, but I've been able to help sort of facilitate all the community players in making that happen. So Habitat for Humanity, the county, the township, the local Lions Club, it continues to be a real blast to be part of something like that. And, not only, as a smaller community like ours, doing our best or doing what we can to help with the housing crisis. This is a real, what do I call it? A community builder. And I'm really proud of that. We need more of that, the positivity. We need more of that right now. And it's been great for the community to get involved and volunteer. So I'm really proud of being involved in that. The other thing is my involvement with ROEDC, which is Rural Oxford Economic Development Committee. So that committee is really involved in raising the profile of rural business in our county. And I'm the vice chair of that group. So I've been able to become pretty involved. We have a fabulous executive director. She's laser focused on our mandate. And that group is really adding tremendous value all over the county. And specifically during COVID, done a lot of really good work to help, like I said, raise the profile of rural business and really support them through COVID. So it's fantastic to be part of that group and be part of that very forward-looking mandate. Another reason why I'm hoping that I'll be reelected is because I love to continue my work with that group. So. Mm-hmm.
And to that point, oh, sorry, go ahead, Lindsay.
That's okay. That's okay. You go.
Oh, and to that point, that kind of segues into, can you describe the job of a municipal councillor? What does a typical day look like for you?
It really varies. Like I said before, I can go 3 or 4 days where there's no emails or calls, or any reports that I have to try to digest. But I usually spend those lighter times by researching specific topics that are interested to me and my community. So, it's not a full-time job, and a lot of it is communication with the public, with councillors, mayors, other representatives, looking into grants, really, trying to support township staff. The meetings themselves, the council meeting themselves sort of run between 1 and 3 hours twice per month. And obviously there's a larger time commitment around budget time when we get into the numbers. But yeah, much of it is talking to residents, doing research, advocacy. Yeah.
And would you say I've heard, it's a full-time job and things like that now, to the point of, I guess it's debatable. Obviously we think you're a very hard worker. The point is that, do you think that you can have that balance of, yes, you can put a lot of time into it, but still find that middle ground of, I don't know, another career or education or family? Like, do you believe that's possible? Because I think that's a hurdle for some women too, is that you're often met with, oh, it's a full-time job and you've got to do all sorts of things, you'll never have enough time, or what about your family, etc. So we're just trying to break down that language with experience to say, we think it's possible, and hopefully,
Yeah, and I think that there's lots of really good examples of women and men that balance multiple things. For me, it works really well. I'm a CPA, and I have a fair bit of flexibility in my schedule, so I can attend meetings when I need to. I think it's completely doable.
Mhm.
If you have the desire and passion, that's the energy that really drives you to do these things. It's like any volunteer work that you do. You typically have a full-time job, and then you have what brings you joy.
Mhm.
And for me, this is the part of my world that brings me joy, because you feel like you're adding value, and you're serving. My day-to-day job doesn't bring me that anymore. And I think, people give, like, you know what I mean? You sort of get into a bit of a rut. And, I'm still good at it, and I still work, 40 hours a week at it. But for me, and I'm sure this is the case with others, what brings you balance is something that brings you joy.
Mhm.
And some people might think, oh, that's just more work. And well, yeah, I guess technically it is work, but it's the type of work that creates the balance in my world. And I would suggest it could do the same for others.
Mhm.
I love that,
Me
Nancy.
too.
And like something Kate and I have talked about at length. But something else we've talked about, which will kind of lead into our next question, is, we're trying to show women how you can, find joy in politics, which is a hard sell sometimes. But it's possible, and you're a good example of that. And so we try to keep it positive and give them the right information, but we also want to make sure we're honest.
Yes.
And so what is one piece of like brutally honest advice that you think any woman considering politics should hear?
Yeah. I think that the best advice and brutally honest advice I could give you is, you have to have a thick skin. You and your council's decisions will be scrutinized.
Yeah.
You will be challenged. You will be criticized. And honestly, sometimes in a not very nice way.
Mhm.
We all know what social media can be like. You really have to, I'm going to just fire a whole bunch of cliches at you. Don't take it personally. Rise above it. Choose your battles.
Mhm.
And my dad always used to say, you learn by listening by listening than talking. They're all true. You really just have to put it in context and not take it personally. But having a thick skin to begin with, or going in with this thick skin, is the solution. Head up, wings out. I don't know if you've heard that
That's
before,
great. I like
but
that.
it's really about have confidence in the decisions that you're making. You've done your research, you've thought out the issue, you've made your decision, have confidence in it.
Mhm. Mhm. And would you say, from your experience, that it gets easier? Like, does the skin, get thicker over time, obviously?
Yeah, it does. And I should have said that in my little spiel there, that certainly with the support, I'm so fortunate to be surrounded by 4 wonderful gentlemen on council who are very, very supportive. We're all very supportive of each other. It has nothing to do with my gender, but we've got a great team. We don't always agree, but when we walk out of council chambers, we are very respectful of others. And certainly in the beginning, I had a really hard time with the criticism. And, the incumbents in particular were very supportive and said, hey, get used to it. And, and really choose your battles, right? You don't have to respond to everything that gets thrown at you, especially when it's thrown at you in such a negative way. If I had a dime for every time somebody said to me the only reason why I got in was because I was female, I'd be a very wealthy woman right now.
Yeah, my word.
Right?
Yeah.
and that's hurtful. You know, I worked really hard for the last 30 years and you know, did all the things I needed to do in my profession, and to be told that I got in because I was female is not what I needed to hear. So that was one of the hardest things to hear when I got in. But you know, not everybody's going to be supportive, so you move on.
I'm thinking maybe we should have a crash course on insults, and we can just, you know, get them all out of the way. Write down, you know, okay, even you could even get into like, what does this trigger, or how does this make me feel?
Yeah.
But I really appreciate your honesty, because that is another factor that can be intimidating. Obviously, going after that role is just what type of criticism could you experience? Because yeah, it's to be expected. You'll get some, right, in such a public position, right? And with social media as well. So Nancy, I'll ask you probably our last question this evening. And again, for everyone watching, we're hoping that Nancy will join us again for maybe a specific topic, but it's been great to dive into many things. But if I can say this one properly, yes. If we were to elect more women to council, what difference do you think we would see?
Yeah, you know, anytime when diversity is introduced into a group, better decision making is made. Full stop.
Yeah,
that's a fact, right? So, you know, whether it's introducing more women or other or some other or a minority group, you know, you get more diversity of opinion, different perspectives, and a better decision gets made. It's really as simple as that, I believe.
That's perfect, and certainly what we're after, right, Linz?
That's right.
That's the goal.
Yeah, well, it's funny because, you know, no matter how, you know, if you're a, you know, let's say you're a passionate feminist and you think more women should be elected, that's lovely. And that is how I feel. But at the same time, it comes down to exactly what you just said, which is, you know, better decisions can be made. And that's what we all want. So no matter where you stand, this is better for everyone. So I hope that this conversation helps people think through their decision to run. And Nancy, if someone had questions, would you be open to a conversation with someone, you know, reaching out, you know, more directly?
Absolutely. I'm happy for you to pass on my contact information for anybody that would like to chat. Yep, happy to talk.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining us. And yeah, this was really great. This was our first one, and you look at the clock and boom, all of a sudden 40 minutes has gone by, or half an hour. It's crazy, you know?
I know,
we
it goes fast.
On the Are You Election Curious, I said to Lindsay and their other team members, I'm like, I think we could have sat on that call for a few more hours. So, but it's been lovely. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy.
And thank you both so much for including me in this. This is such important work that you're doing. And I appreciate your leadership in all of this.
Thank you so much.